I was at the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholder meeting in Omaha. It was an eventful weekend packed with insights on Warren and Charlie, engaging conversations with fellow Berkshire shareholders, and probably too many Negronis. I also got to hang out and talk to legendary investors like Bloomstran and Monish Pabrai. In this video, I'll share my key takeaways from Berkshire Weekend, give you an inside look what it's like to attend in person, and explain why every finance enthusiast should make the pilgrimage to Omaha at least once during their lifetime. Alright, just landed in Omaha. Let's see what this is all about. We spent most of Friday hanging out at the Berkshire Bazaar, which is an exhibition of some of Berkshire's subsidiaries, including See's Candy, NetJets, Geico, DQ, and BNSF Railway. Berkshire reported $30.8 billion in operating earnings from its subsidiaries in 2022, and the exhibition is an excellent demonstration of the strength that powers Berkshire Hathaway's brand. Last year, See's Candy sold 11 tons of peanut brittle and chocolate during the annual meeting, generating $400K in revenue in less than 15 hours. This isn't entirely surprising. Buffett and Munger have been schooling the world on product marketing for years, long before influencers were even a thing. Berkshire shareholders get discounts on things like merch, candy, and books. The bookstore was naturally the most packed part of the expo, and it was pretty cool seeing prominent authors like Robert Cialdini hanging out and signing books. Now, most of Berkshire's subsidiaries are definitely boomer brands, but that didn't stop die-hard millennials. My cousin's buying everything he sees here.
Look how happy he is.
During the evenings, we spent several hours having dinner and drinks with Bloomstrand and a group of his friends. Legendary investor Guy Spear joined us as well. Now, I didn't film this part of the trip in order to respect their privacy, but I was deeply impressed by all of them. Chris was incredibly generous with his time and shared fascinating insights about his approach to life and investing. He discovered Buffett in the late 90s and arguably understands Berkshire's business better than 99% of investors today. Chris bought Berkshire in 2000 when Class A shares were trading at around 43K per share. Today, they're trading close to 500K per share. This has compounded nicely over the years, and it reminded me that the fastest way to get rich is to go slow. Bloomstrand's fund, Semper Augustus, currently holds a $128 million position in Berkshire spread across A shares and B shares. My cousin Virat, who you saw earlier, actually coded up this platform called deepvalue.ai on his free time as a side project, and it's an awesome way to explore what stocks value investors like Bloomstrand currently hold in their portfolios. Another thing that stood out to me from meeting people like Chris was how much they knew about everything, not just business and finance. They were all incredibly well read, and most of the time I just found myself sitting in silence, probably looking weird as hell as I tried to make sense of what they were saying.
I don't know shit about fuck.
So I read probably 1 to 2 hours every day, and I used to think that was pretty good, but it's not even close to being enough. These guys spend most of their day reading and doing research. That's how you learn. Just like money, knowledge compounds. I mean, Buffett reads what, like 7 or 8 hours per day? That's all he does. He just sits and reads. He reads hundreds of annual reports every year from companies that he doesn't even own yet, in order to understand how these businesses operate. When the opportunity arises to get in at a fair price, he's ready to pounce. Pretty much every investor I met in Omaha shared this attitude towards reading. Remember the footage of all the people in the bookstore? Over time, these people are building a large filing cabinet of knowledge that's stored inside their brains that they can tap into at a moment's notice. Sure, we can always Google things and ask ChatGPT, but this doesn't help in situations when we need to make rapid decisions. Having met all these people, I realized that I need to step up my reading game big time. On Saturday, we woke up at 4:30 a.m. Getting to the convention center early is key in order to get good seats for the shareholder meeting. Doors open at 7 a.m. and the meeting starts at 9 a.m. But once we got there at 5 a.m., we realized people had been lining up since freaking 3:30. Once the doors finally opened at 7 a.m., some people who had just arrived took the liberty to cut in line. Even boomers did it.
No way. You see that guy? Wow, that's a dick move.
Bad omen.
Even these old people.
But you know what these oldies don't have that we do? Speed. Once we got inside, we sprinted and managed to snag a few solid seats after all. It was pretty dope to see 40,000 people gathered to hear Warren and Charlie live. Who said you have to be an athlete or a musician to fill a stadium? With 5 bank collapses just this spring, the topic on most people's minds heading into the meeting was unsurprisingly the banking crisis. Warren and Charlie had prepared a little showmanship to tackle these questions.
Anticipating a few questions on banks, I decided we should start using bank language here to describe and Charlie,
Buffett would then go on to explain what a terrific invention the FDIC is, and at the same time criticize politicians and the media for not properly communicating how FDIC insurance works. And by failing to do so, they instigated the problem.
We did something enormously sensible, in my view, when we set up the FDIC. If you have people that are worried about whether their money is safe in a bank and all trying to withdraw it, you can't run an economy very well. So the messaging has been very poor. It's been poor by the politicians, who sometimes have an interest in having it poor. It's been poor by the agencies, and I'd say it's been poor by the press.
I was particularly curious what Warren and Charlie would have to say about bankers, given that Berkshire has owned large positions in several banks over the years, including Wells Fargo and B of A. Berkshire obviously sold Wells following the cross-selling scandal in 2016, and they noticed issues with banks' balance sheets leading up to the collapse of SVB and First Republic. This triggered Berkshire to sell additional banking positions. That being said, they continue to own a large stake in B of A. Here's what Charlie had to say about bankers.
I don't think having a bunch of bankers, all of them are trying to get rich, leads to good things. I think a banker should be more like an engineer. He's more like into avoiding trouble than he is getting rich.
Yeah, and they could do fine.
They can do fine that way.
Charlie has in the past said that you can't trust bankers to control themselves because they're like heroin addicts. Banking can be an incredibly attractive business model though, so what process does Warren and Charlie rely on to decide which bankers are trustworthy and think like engineers and which ones don't? I put my name down to ask a few questions live, but my name wasn't picked during the lottery process. Safe to say, I was pretty bitter about it. A lot of people spend like 2 minutes introducing themselves before asking the question. And they're like flexing on where they went to school, where they're working. Like no one gives a shit, man. Just get to the point. We have an opportunity to ask really good questions here. Do you agree? Yeah. She agrees. Like just get to the point. Ask the question. You have the opportunity to ask a question to two of the best capital allocators the world has ever seen. And what you're doing is talking about yourself. It's so dumb.
You just let us ask the questions.
But it wasn't all that bad. I was very impressed by some of the younger shareholders. The best question by far was asked by a 13-year-old girl who said she's been a Berkshire shareholder for 6 years.
Over the past few years, the Federal Reserve has telegraphed that they intend to monetize the debt by printing trillions of dollars, even as they insist that they're fighting inflation. Already, other major economies in the world, such as China, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil, are moving away from the dollar in anticipation of this. My question is, are we likely to face a time in the future when the US dollar is no longer the global reserve currency? How is Berkshire prepared for this possibility? And what can we do as American citizens to attempt to shelter ourselves from what's beginning to look like the beginnings of de-dollarization?
If that girl represents our future, then the future is bright. Here's how Warren and Charlie responded.
It's very interesting. I mean, we are the reserve currency, and I see no option for any other currency to be the reserve currency. And I think that nobody understands the situation better than Jay Powell. But he's not in control of fiscal policy.
Warren is clearly bullish on Jerome Powell, and in a recent interview with Becky Quick said that Jay Powell's been terrific.
I think Jay Powell has been a terrific.
This is obviously debatable, and I personally think the Fed could have and should have acted sooner to rein in inflation. They misled us for too long by calling inflation transitory. Buffett is more skeptical of fiscal policy and hinted that American politicians on both sides of the aisle should be very careful not to put the country in a dire situation. The ongoing negotiations around the debt ceiling is obviously an incredibly important topic that we all should be following closely. Buffett, unsurprisingly, also took the opportunity to refute the idea that Bitcoin or any other token could replace the US dollar as the global reserve currency. In stark contrast to people like Balaji, whose hyperinflation theory I covered in a previous video. Buffett called both Bitcoin and printing money madness. But what's the solution then? That unfortunately remained unanswered in my view. Over the past couple of years, we've had people like Ray Dalio write that America is an empire in decline, and that China will soon surpass the US. Buffett, on the other hand, has always urged us to bet on America. So I was eager to hear if his thoughts on this had changed at all. Here's what he had to say.
The United States is a better place to live than it was when I was born by a huge factor. The problem we have is that partisanship, it seems to me, has moved toward tribalism. And tribalism just doesn't work as well. I mean, when it gets to tribalism, you don't even hear the other side, and tribalism can lead to mobs. We have to refine in a certain way our democracy as we go along. But if I still had a choice of any place to be born in the world, I'd want to be born in the United States, and I'd want to be born today.
Buffett also seemed worried about Taiwan, which made my ears perk up. When asked why Berkshire sold its $5 billion position in Taiwan Semiconductor after holding it only for a few months, Buffett mentioned the following.
I don't like its location, and I've reevaluated that. I feel better about the capital that we've got deployed in Japan than in Taiwan. I wish it weren't so, but I think that's a reality, and I reevaluated that in the light of certain things that were going on.
It's becoming increasingly clear to me that Taiwan will remain a hotly contested topic in geopolitics over the next few years. If a war breaks out between the US and China, Taiwan will likely be the catalyst. So what about the topic of wealth creation? Warren stressed the idea that most people in the world are short-term focused, and if he and Charlie were born again today, they would still make a lot of money, regardless of all the advancements in AI and tech.
The tech doesn't make any difference or any of that. I mean, if you look at how the world's changed in the years since 1942 when I started, you'd say, well, how does a kid that doesn't know anything about airplanes, that doesn't know anything about engines and cars, and doesn't know anything about electricity and all that? But that really isn't that's not the world changing doesn't, or new things coming along don't take away the opportunities. What gives you opportunities is other people doing dumb things.
This reminded me of what Naval says about wealth and how making money is a skill. Charlie also emphasized the importance of solving easy problems. Elon is solving hard problems, which is of course great, but you don't have to do that to become wealthy.
He likes taking on the impossible job and doing it. We're different. Warren and I are looking for the easy job that we can identify.
Yeah. If we can do it playing tic-tac-toe, we'll do it, you know. I mean, but we don't want to compete with Elon in a lot of things. I mean,
Charlie once said that everyone's life is a search for the perfect company. For Warren and Charlie, it was Berkshire Hathaway. For Elon, it was Tesla, and probably even more so, SpaceX. What's interesting to me is that Charlie didn't even get serious about investing until he was like 38 years old. He held a bunch of random jobs until then, including working as an army meteorologist, a lawyer, and a real estate developer. But once he discovered Berkshire, the perfect company for him, he built his life around it and truly excelled. Before I let you go, I want to share this next gem which really resonated with me, and I think it will with you as well.
There's all kinds of things, compromises that people have to make in most jobs. I had 5 bosses in my life, and I liked all 5 of them, but I had to do what they told me to do, which was to sell men's shirts first, then men's clothing, then children's clothing, and so on. I had a great manager when I was at University of Nebraska. Got to work for Ben Graham. I mean, everything worked out, but there's nothing like working for yourself.
There's nothing like working for yourself. As an entrepreneur, I couldn't agree with that more. I'm very thankful that I got to see Warren and Charlie live before it's too late, and I hope to be back in Omaha again next year. It's of course easy to watch the full meeting coverage on CNBC, but that's not where the value lies. The value lies in meeting like-minded people and truly feeling Warren and Charlie's energy all around you. They're unlike anything the world has ever seen. All right, we just left the convention center, and I feel freaking tired.
Wait.
Yeah, we were in there for 8 hours, but the funny thing is, the Warren and Charlie, they didn't look tired at all. Freaking machines. Got a 99-year-old and a 92-year-old. Just shows, man, they're in a different league than everyone else. It's funny how Warren was talking about that he would never retire, like how most people retire at 65. He would find that incredibly boring. When do you want to retire?
If I can make it to 99, that'll be a dream. Let's say 80. I think 80's a good one.
80? Yeah. I feel like retiring right now. That was fun though.
Good weekend.